1993 was a shock because of one game, Doom, basically reinventing the FPS genre. But many players were still left with Amigas underpowered to run such an engine. Many games tried, but in the process had to use tricks, remove features, or reduce screen size. They were fun, but couldn't come close to the original. I am KK of Altera Group, and here's my try to change that. Hello again. In the last episode, using a few tricks, we have really improved the weapon graphics. Oh wait.
Hey man, this is John calling.
Hi John.
If I may, your weapons still suck.
Well...
We could use hardware sprites, you know.
I know, but for most frames it won't fit.
I'll make them fit. Hold my beer.
Hi, I'm John Tsakiris from Pixel Glass and I'm helping KK with his awesome Dread project. In this episode, I'll guide you through the upgrade process for the game's weapon set, so let's begin. Weapons are currently rendered on screen as blitter objects, which means they are not size restricted and we have the ability to make them as big as we like. However, all bobs also share the same limited 16 color palette with everything else, for example textures and enemies, plus they need to be downscaled to match the in-game 2x2 resolution. To help with the color and resolution loss, KK's engine features an automatic vertical dither function which can help on occasion. Unfortunately, the dither can also add extra grain to surfaces which can obscure the design further. All the above, combined with the automatic conversion process from the 24-bit color originals, can result in a less than ideal outcome. Now, besides bobs, hardware sprites are also available and they come with a number of benefits. First of all, they can use their own 16-color palette, separate from the textures and bobs one. This comes with the additional plus that you can safely change palettes per level without affecting weapons. On top of that, the palette can change on the fly, so each frame or weapon can have its own unique one. They can be rendered in 1x1 resolution independent of in-game display versus bobs that need to be downscaled, for example. Also, sprite animations can play in a steady frame rate higher from the FPS the engine outputs. And last but not least, they offer a small performance gain. With those points in mind, let's check sprite limitations next. The OCS chipset has the ability to display 8 hardware sprites, 3 colors each, with every 2 sprites sharing the same 4 color subpalette, including a color reserved for transparency. In regards to size, they can be 16 pixels wide and unlimited height. Alternative to normal sprites, and by combining sprite channels, the OCS can display 4 attached sprites instead, 15 colors each, sharing the same palette, and having the same size restrictions with normal ones. Since we want to make use of the full range of the palette per sprite, we decided to use only attached ones to construct the weapons. Therefore, the next question was if they could fit in width and still look nice and legit. So first thing I did was a quick conversion and animation test using weapon assets from Doom 1 itself. Each frame and weapon was first converted to its own 15-color palette, and then frames bigger than 64 pixels wide were resized to fit. Overall, quite decent result I think, which proves that this is the way to go. So next up is a closer look at some of our assets to see what we're dealing with. For the purposes of this demo, KK uses weapons from the Free Doom project. Besides the width resizings that need to be done, these assets seem to disregard pixel art conventions, so unlike Doom weapons, we'll have a more difficult time to convert them to a 15-color palette. Plus, we'll probably need to do some additional redesign, clean up and repixeling, as well as rethink the animation sequences themselves. With the above in mind, let's start with a handgun. First to check is the width requirements. It seems that this is an easy fit, so no further scaling is needed. Let's move on straight to recoloring. We need to do a quick test to see what the result would look like under 15 colors. I'll try an automatic color reduction first so the palette colors won't be handpicked. Not ideal, but it's okay at this phase. Kinda expected. The original lacks contrast and many colors are just too close to each other. As a result, the gun's details are completely obliterated. We'll need to tweak the image first. What I did here was to increase the contrast and added more shadows. This will not only help with a limited palette, but will also bring the handgun to be more in line with the in-game light levels. Let's try again with a color reduction. Better. It's still quite messy, but we'll work this out. Notice here that there are still plenty hand hues that are quite close to each other. These colors also don't represent how it will look on Amiga. We need first to convert the image to OCS's 4096 color palette and then try the color reduction again. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. The gun still lacks grey colors for a better rendition, and we can optimize the palette further with a few manual tweaks. With the palette almost ready and the frames converted to the new colors, next it's pixeling time. Enhance the details on the pistol and generally clean it up. Let's compare this result and our very first color reduction attempt. Next is testing the animation and see how the result might look like in-game. Looks okay. We can do better though. The overall color of the hand came out a bit orangish. Compared to the shotgun, for example, it surely feels off. This is an easy fix. Just tweak the palette a bit. There is one last detail we need to work on. Notice the muzzle flash. To save color, I'm reusing some of the hand colors there. As a result, it now lacks in vibrance though. This can also be fixed with a small trick. Since we can change sprite colors on the fly, we could set a special palette just for this shooting frame. Here's the result with some extra cleanup. The muzzle flash looks now more convincing. I had to trade in a grey color which made the pistol slightly darker. However, the frame happens really fast and the focal point is the muzzle flash, so it should be fine. Let's check the whole finalized anim. I need to point here that the hand design detail and shading in general, especially the highlights, still leave much to be desired. A more thorough repixeling or a complete redesign could probably fix this, but for the moment we're okay. Comparing the final sprite is enough to convince me to move on. I know what you're thinking. There's no way we can fit those huge frames in, right? Before we do any color conversion, we need to bring the shotgun frames within our 64 pixels wide limit. Let's see what we can do about that. First, the easy part. The two firing frames seem to fit pretty fine, but the idle one would need to be tweaked. We need to make the gun slightly smaller. The idle frame is supposed to be further from your body compared to the firing frames, so making it smaller also helps the anim. The tiny hand part is also an easy fix. A vertical alignment would do the trick. Cool, now to the difficult part. We need to decide what to do with the reload frames. The first one seems like an easy fit with some tweaking. The second is a bit of a stretch but still doable, and the third one is quite the beast. Question is, do we really need to use those specific frames to achieve a nice reload anim? This is a rough recreation of how this anim is set up in FreeDoom. It kinda feels it wobbles around and the arm tilt and perspectives are perhaps a bit too much. Let's simplify things and try to make this animation a bit smoother. The bigger offender for the shaky effect here is the last frame with its strange twisting. It's also the largest of the three and there is no way we can fit it unless we do drastic resizing. But then the hand will become too small and we'd have to also resize all the other frames to match it. So setting aside this frame feels like a no-brainer really. Which leaves us to the other two. The second frame has the forestock half drawn and is used as a middle between the first and the last frame. This doesn't really help the animation because the forestock needs to be pulled fast. Therefore, an in-between frame with the forestock half drawn is unnecessary. With frame 3 gone though, we need a replacement where the forestock is fully pulled, so frame 2 might be a good candidate. Checking its size, it's obvious that we need to do further tweaks to also make it fit. We'll see. Let's check frame 1 next. This looks already good enough. Just a few tweaks and it's ready. The bottom left part seems like an undefined black blob, so it's for the best to clean it up. Part of the bottom will also be hidden behind the HUD during the animation, so we can crop this further. Remember that RAM is generally also a concern, so all this cropping will gonna help a lot. Size-wise, this frame is ready. The hand part looks too shiny at the top though and lacks proper anti-aliasing. So one extra fix for that and it's done. We need to go back to the fully drawn forestock frame next. We can either tweak a duplicate of frame 1 or frame 2. After some testing, I decided to go with the former, which means we can set aside all frame 2 as well. Let's check a new animation with everything we have so far. Neat. Notice that while the new reload animation uses one frame less, the actual overall duration is slightly longer thanks to reused frames for smoother gun movement. With that done, let's go to color conversion and repixeling. Since we've already seen the process with a handgun, I'm gonna skip steps and go straight to the cleaned up result. The weapon and hand details came out pretty fine, but the muzzle flashes took a hit again as they are using the same palette with the other frames. If you check closely, the hand is missing completely from the firing frames, which means we can remove all the pink hand colors and replace them with hues the muzzle flash actually needs. Now the whole set is much closer to the originals color-wise. Let's check the animation with these new frames and then on to the next weapon. We start with the Freedom frames again. To the left we have the idle frame and to the right the firing frame without the muzzle flashes. First thing to notice here is that we'll have to do some serious redesign with this weapon. The cone seems to fit fine, but the main bodies are just too big. Resizing and cropping the body in places can make frame 1 fit. Same with frame 2. But since this is the firing frame, it will come closer to the bottom, so this part will be mostly invisible during the animation, which means we can crop the lower part further. The overall design for both frames feels pretty weak for the moment, but it's okay as a first draft. Next, we need to set up the 16 color palette and do the recoloring. I've already taken into account the colors for the muzzle flash, which we'll deal with last. After this step, we've got a palette we can work with, but the image is now a mismatch of pixels. There's no point working on top of that mess, so I'll just use this as a general guide. The final result is a complete rework from scratch. The design is now a lot different from the original, but the render came out quite smooth and satisfying. Let's move on to the muzzle flashes next. The original frames look good enough size-wise. The bottom part can easily be removed and for the rest it's a matter of slight resizing. However, the actual design of the effect itself doesn't feel that convincing. The frames feel few, the shape is lacking, and the colors lack contrast. They are also way too close to each other, and for the number of colors we can spend, this design is not gonna cut it. So the flash effect needs also to be remade from scratch. And here's the final animation with the new flashes. The red colors are changing with every frame as the flash dims and disappears, so there's constant palette swap happening. We're okay with this weapon. Next and last stop is the chain gun. Same as with a missile launcher, we've got two frames. To the right we've got the idle, which is also used as a shooting frame, and to the left it's shooting frame number 2. Both are displayed here without the flashes. Given our size restrictions, the chain gun will need a resize and a general redesign just like the missile launcher. However, I'd like to explore one extra possibility first. As already mentioned, current sprites are made out of 4 16-pixel wide attached sprites, which gives us a total width of 64 pixels. But we can also use a combination of normal and attached ones, so for example, we could use 3 attached sprites and 2 normal ones, which would increase our width to 80 pixels wide. The frames would need very little work to fit them. However, the catch is that now 2 of our available sprites need to be 3 colors each. So in this case, we'll keep the attached 16 color sprites in the middle section, because we need to also display the flashes there, and we'll place the 2 normal sprites at the sides. These parts need to be 3 colors only. Let's do a quick test. Not bad. The left frame gives a result that seems legit. With additional pixel work, it would be doable to somewhat mask the color count difference between the side and central sprites. However, this frame's design favors the outcome as the bright part and most of the detail is located at the center. Let's do the same test with a second frame. And here's the problem. With this frame having most of its detail located at the sides and in between, the normal sprites now feel way too distinct. 3 available colors are just way too few, and the difference between attached and normal sprites will be too hard to mask. We also cannot move the sprites around because, as already mentioned, we still need to display the muzzle flashes at the top of the middle section. Comparing these two with the final render of the missile launcher makes it clear that the trick is not gonna cut it. At least not with this specific chain gun design. Back to trims and resizing. Squashed and deformed, but now they fit. I'm using nearest neighbor transformations to avoid introducing transparent pixels, blurriness, and extra hues to the image. This creates a lot of jagged edges, but it will be all cleaned up once I do the repixeling. First to deal with the palette and color conversion though. It will get worse before it gets better. Expected result, but now we're ready to start pixeling. Like with the missile launcher, these frames will be kept only for reference while the finals will be done from scratch. Cool. For the flashes, the process is similar as with the rest of the weapons. Here is the result. With that done, let's check the animation next. The pixeling process for all 4 weapons is now complete, but the actual animations are not yet finalized. The examples you just saw ran at nearly 12 FPS. We'll need to set up new animes with KK's tool, and since the sprites run in-game at a higher frame rate, we have a chance to rework and enhance them. I'll leave this last part to KK, so cheers from me.
Thanks John for the graphics. Now it's time to put them into the game. Okay, I only wish it was that easy in real life. Definitely much better. There is still one thing we can improve here. In Amiga, sprites are handled completely separately from the main screen behind them. Not only we can move them independently with full resolution, but they can also be animated smoothly without locking to the rendering speed. We can't really add new graphics frames due to memory limitations. But we can play with offsets and move what frames we already have, smoothing things out. The improved pistol animation will be shown at about 37 keyframes per second. Side-by-side comparison. Old pistol for reference. Thanks John again. I think the commentary is useless. Walking weapon swing was also improved. Weapon animation frame rate is completely independent from the rendering frame rate now. And here John decided to make 2 new frames. Chain gun is the smallest weapon, so memory should not be a big issue. We also have decided to make a spin down animation. And the last weapon for now, the launcher. Vertical offsets help in smoothing also in this case. Thanks for watching! Please subscribe and click the notification bell if you'd like to know when the next video comes out. See you next time!